Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. I'm your host, Eric Heinlich, and I am back again. Well, you probably never knew that I left, but I am here sitting in the chair at my desk with the microphone in front of me, and once again, here for Gleaning and Gathering. There's just a lot that I have been gleaning over these past few weeks. You know, I don't know if as a leader you go through these times. You probably do. Seasons of intense activity. You know, there's just so much going on. And because of all that's going on, you end up out of your normal rhythm these past few weeks. And so I had a 29-week streak going of going to the gym 5 days in a row. And it was a life-giving thing. And there were lots of other of those sorts of patterns that were there. And over the past few weeks, that has changed because of just the season that I'm in. And, you know, rather than trying to fight that, I have just embraced it. And so I made a conscious commitment to say, you know what, we're going to pause these things. We're coming back to them, but right now, this is a different season. And I think that's important, you know, when you're scheduling and when you're thinking about life, not to get so locked in and become so legalistic about the kinds of life-giving patterns that we have that we can't put them aside, even for a short period of time, to do something that is important as well. And so for me, that's been intentional. I'm glad I did it, and now I'm back. And so this morning, back up early to the gym, doing the things that I need to be doing to get back in the rhythm and the routine. During the time that we were gone, we just made some incredible memories as a family. And I am so thankful that we did what we did. A few months ago, we were talking about what to do. My wife and I were going to be celebrating 25 years of marriage this year and thinking about how do we celebrate that. This is probably one of the last summers that we'll all be together as a family with the possibility of our girls headed off to different things in the future, whether that's away or whether that's jobs or whether that's other things. The chance of us really being able to, as a family together, all 8 of us, go anywhere, do anything, this was probably it. And so we were thinking about that and just really wanted to be intentional about that time. You know, as families, you can go somewhere and spend a few days vegging out, but we really didn't want to just do that. We wanted to do more. And so for us, always we've had ministry and serving together as part of just the DNA of who we are. And so we were looking at different opportunities and praying about that, and really felt like that Alaska, and particularly Fairbanks, Alaska, was where we should go. And so we went there. We flew into Fairbanks, and we're there on the 18th. And so there was a long trip up as we flew through Seattle and then flew into Fairbanks, and then got started trying to adjust to this new time zone. And 4 hours difference doesn't sound like much, but it means that you're eating supper at midnight, or would be midnight back home, and trying to adjust to that. We did over time slowly adjust to this new pattern, and then there's all the light. You know, it just stays light till after midnight there, and of course you've got just constant light. Really, it really doesn't ever get dark there this time of year, and so that made it difficult to sleep. And so trying to adjust to that, there was a lot of adjustment, but we were there working with the Calhoun family and helping there at Chena Camp and endeavoring to just move the ball forward. There were a number of things that we worked on. We had a vacation Bible school effort that we did, and as a family, telling the stories and singing the songs and playing the games and doing all the things with the children and the young people that came, preaching in both of the services. We were there on 2 different Sundays and sharing in both of those, and just really celebrating as well. We went to a place on our anniversary, my wife and I did, for our 25th wedding anniversary. We went to Hot Licks, which was a local ice cream place up there with homemade ice cream, and had an ice cream cone, and it was great. It was beautiful, and we made some memories along the way. We did just some incredible things. One of the things that we did while we were there, one of our friends, Liz Hartman, a few years ago was on Master Chef, and she was a top 10 contestant in that. And so she has since gotten lots of opportunities to go and cook different places. And so she was going to be cooking for a cruise. And so she was headed down to Whittier, Alaska. And so we had the opportunity to go with her and kind of kill two birds with one stone. She needed a ride, but we really wanted to see Alaska. And so being able to drive down and be able to see the sights along the way with her really as a tour guide, she was pointing out things. She just has such a love for that place and for the people of that place. It's just amazing, all the different connections that she has. And as we were going, we had an opportunity to go kayaking on a big lake, and there was a creek system connected to that, and just a wilderness adventure that she helped arrange, and she had done some promotion for these folks, and it was an opportunity for us to connect with some of her friends there. But it was just a blast. We had so much fun. We went on a hike at midnight to Angel Rock, and it was right near Chena Hot Springs, just outside Fairbanks, and we did this hike at almost midnight and climbed to the top of this, just amazing vista, just beautiful place. And it was probably a mile and a half in, and doing that together as a family was just so incredibly memorable. We took some pictures there and had prayer there, and it was just it was a special time. And then after we went to Whittier. Whittier was a place that was originally a army base of some kind, a military location, and so there's really only one way in. And I guess the reason that they originally had picked this location was that it's so overcast there most of the time and shielded around by mountains that they thought that the chances of them getting strafed or it being seen from the air was pretty low. And there's only one way in. And so they tunneled through a mountain, and there was a train that would come in and out and could control who was there. And so it's really a ultimate gated community. I guess originally there was only one building. Everybody lived in this one building. That was where the post office and everything else was at. And so it was an interesting situation, and we paid our fare to get in, and it alternates every half hour, and so one half hour the traffic is outbound, the next half hour the traffic is inbound, and there's only one lane through this tunnel. And so we got there just before we were the last car in, and we made it through into there, and Liz was able to make her connection with the boat captain and get where she was going. And so then our family headed on our way and headed towards Seward. That morning we had made some calls, but hadn't gotten any calls back. Up there this time of year, everything is full, everything is crazy expensive, and so there were no reservations, no places to stay in Seward where we were planning to go that night. And I had called this Moby Dick hostel in downtown Seward, and they hadn't called me back, and I was having a difficult time. And Liz, when she heard about it, said, well, let me call a friend and see what kind of connections we can make for you in Seward. And so she did, and a few calls later, she had a place for us to stay that night, an amazing place. And it was one that hadn't yet been listed on Airbnb, a friend of hers, and they made this available to us, and just beautiful little cabin. And it was a wonderful time, and we had a peaceful night's rest there, made it in safely, and then that next day got to explore Seward. Just a beautiful place. Now, Rebecca and I had been there before previously, and we had gone on a little wildlife adventure, getting to see that from the ocean. And so we didn't have an opportunity to do that this time. It's a little more difficult to do things with 8 people than it is to do with 2, just expense wise and otherwise. But we still saw some just amazing scenery there in Seward, and also we're just able to explore the area. And then we started heading back up the coast, stopping along the way, taking lots of pictures. Samuel had his drone, and so he got that out, and we had lots of great memories along the way as he was flying around and seeing things from the air and taking some great photos and some great video footage. We made it all the way to Wasilla that night, and we stayed with some friends that Brother Tim Calhoun had connected us with at Camp Maranatha. And Camp Maranatha is just an amazing place, but we had never been there, and so we had no idea really what to expect. And so they had told us that there was a dry cabin that we could stay at, and that there's no bedding, but we could stay there. And so we really weren't sure what to expect. What is a dry cabin? We weren't quite sure what that meant. Well, a dry cabin just means that there's no running water in it, but we didn't know that, and we didn't know whether this is a shed with a floor that we can throw a few sleeping bags on, or what is it? We don't know. And so we got there, and John Miller met us, and he's the director there at Camp Maranatha. And normally they're full. They've got groups. I think he said they had 50 some groups last year, and so group just about every week. But there were no groups there that night, and so we had cabin number 1, and it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And it's right on a lake, and it was just beautiful weather and amazing view. And we ate our supper at a picnic table, and we had a beautiful night's rest there, and it was just such a blessing. And we were just so thankful for their hospitality and the way in which God just arranged all that. And hearing the story of how God is working there at Camp Maranatha, and how he has been helping them as they're rebuilding a number of the cabins that they had from before, upgrading, but also upgrading their dining hall, and just doing some amazing things, working primarily with churches out of the Anchorage area that come there with groups. It's about an hour away from Anchorage, and it's just an amazing place and a beautiful space that has been a blessing to just so many people. And it sounds like just a wonderful, wonderful ministry that God has given them there. And so I've shared a little bit about Victory Acres and what we're doing here, but it was just great to meet John, to hear his vision for the place, and to see what God's doing there. And Camp Maranatha was just such a blessing to our family. That next morning, we ate breakfast again at the picnic table out by the lake, and it was just beautiful to see how God has blessed that place. And so we headed to the Iditarod headquarters that morning, and one of Sarah's bucket list items was to be able to do something with sled dogs while we were there. And we got to meet a real live musher, and we had an opportunity to ride with a team. And there was a four-wheeler that the engine's out of it, and the dogs pull that during the summer, and that's how they practice and stay in shape. But he's run the Iditarod a number of times, and he's also been in the Yukon Quest, and he's been at it, I think he said 16 years. And so it was just a lot of fun to meet him and to see the history that's there, and to just to spend some time looking at all that and reflecting all that. And so then from there we went to Talkeetna, and there's just an amazing story of a man who had a vision for building a lodge on a glacier on a mountain. And it was a pretty cool story, a story that true story. But he and his wife lived in Talkeetna, this kind of little place off the beaten path. It's a place that you wouldn't know was there, but many of the planes that fly to go and land on these glaciers on Denali, they come from Talkeetna. And so there were planes constantly taking off and landing while we were there that day. And we went through a little museum that was there and spent just a little bit of time. But there are some amazing views of Denali, or what you in the lower 48 would call Mount McKinley. But it's an amazing place. And there were lots of just really great stories that we heard and learned while we were there. It was great, and we had a good time. And so we left there late afternoon and began traveling back to Fairbanks and made it back then late that night. And had 3 days, and we felt like we had crammed 6 days worth of activities into those 3 days as we traveled down and traveled back. But it was an amazing time. We saw lots and lots of Alaska and spent some great time as a family. And it was just great. And we got back and helped more at Chena Camp and spent more time there with the Calhoun and Hartman family. And we just had some wonderful, precious times sitting around the campfire at Chena Camp after a long day's work, and lots of activity had gone on, and just sharing. And it was special. It was so special. And I am so thankful for the opportunity that God gave us to be part of that, making memories, celebrating, but also serving and doing just whatever needed to be done. We packed up Sunday night after our time there and after service, and then began to make our way to the airport. Flew out at 2:15 in the morning and headed to Seattle. First of all, landed in Seattle, had a flight then to Phoenix, a layover in Phoenix, and then we flew back to Indianapolis, got in that night, and then tried to adjust the other way. And I'll tell you, jet lag is real. And there were a number of nights that we had people up at 1:30 and 2 in the morning because it's still nice and light outside in Alaska, and our bodies were telling us that it wasn't time to go to bed yet. But we finally adjusted and are adjusting back to Indiana time. But it was Wednesday morning that we got the news that Blaine Hartman had been killed in a motorcycle accident. Blaine was a young father and Liz Hartman's husband, and just the news of his death was so incredibly shocking to all of us and to so many. We had just been there, just gave him a hug Sunday night, and he told me he appreciated me and just really thanked us for our visit. And it was just so precious to be with him and to be with his two little boys, Anthony and Oakley. And Carissa had just such a fun time playing with them. And we had so many great memories. And it was Friday night that he had taken his boys for a camp out, and our family at the same time was panning for gold there in a nearby stream, and we had some great talks. We had some great memories. It was just, we were so close. And then to get the news that he was in eternity, he was in service that last Sunday morning that we were there, and then that next Sunday morning they're having his memorial service at that same chapel. It was just so surreal. And so for us as a family, it was a reminder of how short life really is. Here's a young man in his 20s that's just so alive, so incredibly alive. And then all of a sudden he's gone. He's in eternity. And just the reminder that only God knows what the future holds, and that every day is a gift. We don't know what's ahead. We don't know what's just right over the horizon. But it made me thankful all over again that we had spent the time that we had, and that we had gone where we did. I really felt like that God had us there at that strategic time on mission with him. And it was such a blessing to us. It was just so many great memories, so many wonderful things that we experienced together as a family that we will never forget. And things that God is using still in our lives and in our children's lives to help shape us. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that in spite of the pain and the sense of loss that all of us are feeling right now over Blaine's passing, that God gave us the time that we did have with him and with the rest of the folks who were there. I certainly would ask that you would pray for Liz and for Anthony and Oakley especially during this time. And they are grieving deeply the loss of their husband and father, and will be. Their lives will never be fully the same. And we are trusting that God will surround them, that he will bring comfort as only he can, and that he will help them on the journey as they are continuing to just try to take the next steps, whatever those steps look like. The vision that they have for Chena Camp is one that I fell in love with while I was there. There's a lodge where Liz is planning to have a kitchen area where she can teach kids about how to cook and share the skills and the love of cooking that she has, and have dinners and gatherings and parties and other sorts of things there. There's 11 cabins there at Chena Camp, and all in various states of repair, and some of them are about ready for guests, and others need some work. But we were able to help kind of nudge things along with some of that while we were there. But seeing all of that and seeing what it could be through the eyes of faith, that as God provides the resources that are needed, I believe it's just going to be a great place. And we talked about, what might happen if we had the Nehemiah Discipleship Program North there and take a few leaders and run an NDP there in Fairbanks, and what might happen with that. And I don't know. We'll be praying about that and the possibilities for the future. But it was an exciting place, and a place that's in progress, a place with lots of work to do, and a place that really has some deep connections to the work that we're doing here. Deep connections relationally, but also deep connections in terms of just the overall philosophy of life. Really trying to help people to help themselves and to dig into real stuff, to teach cooking, or to teach how to turn logs into lumber, or to do the kinds of things that we've trained at the Nehemiah Discipleship Program, and help young people to put tools in their toolbox and to develop as leaders, and so that they can engage in the mission of God in the world, to do the things that he's given them to do, I think is incredibly important work wherever you are at, whether it's Fairbanks, Alaska, or whether it's Upland, Indiana, whether it's where you live. And so just a real sense of connection to what they're doing there, and just sinking their teeth into real stuff. And I am excited to see how God continues to provide for what they're doing there. And it was just exciting to see someone else working on the vision that God's given them, and to be able to help kind of nudge that forward and do what we can to help them on their journey. And to do that from the perspective of, again, not there to receive, but there to give, there to help, there to just put our hand to the plow and do what we can to help move that forward. And we certainly have been thankful over the years for those who have helped us here at Victory Acres in a similar way. And I felt like that it was a small way of us being able to try to pay that back, or pay it forward, as they say. And so it was a great time. We made lots of memories as a family, and getting back from that, and getting back from days that seemed like they were 18 hours long. Some of them probably were. And this around the clock kind of push, everything's happening kind of feel. It's been an exhausting time. It was an exhausting time, and so getting caught up sleep-wise and otherwise, from that, and digging out from underneath the piles of stuff that need to be done while you're gone. All of that, you know what that's like. And so we've been trying to do that, but also trying to reestablish patterns that are life-giving and that are healthy and helpful. And so that's some of what I'm gleaning right now, is that there are these seasons of life where, there are times when you just need to set things over to the side and say, right now, this is what I'm going to focus on. This is what I'm going to be intentional about. Thankful for what God is teaching me during this time. Yesterday at the gathering, I shared a message from 2 Chronicles about the life of Hezekiah, and particularly when Hezekiah, after taking the reins of power at 25 years of age, came in and began to clean house, so to speak. And he began to refocus the minds and the hearts of the people of Judah on God and on the worship of God. And it was after he had done all that King Sennacherib showed up and that the trouble began to happen. And, following God, I pointed out, doesn't eliminate us having trouble and difficulties in our life. It doesn't eliminate the King Sennacheribs in our life. But what it does mean is that we, when those things come, are on believing ground. That we can trust that God does hear our prayers and that He is able to help us in the middle of those difficulties. And so when it did show up, King Hezekiah was encouraging others to look to God. He was praying. He was preparing. He was doing what he could with what he had. But he was on believing ground. And I think it's really important, friends, that when it comes time to die, all you have to do is die. As my friend Mark Sankey said a few years ago. I think that there are a variety of things that you may be living with right now that you need to get taken care of. Whatever's going on, whatever it is that you need to get cleaned up, cleared out, dealt with, do it. I encourage you, do it today. Don't wait. And make sure that when it comes time to die, all you have to do is die. Don't live with regrets. Don't live with things left undone, with apologies that still need to be made and things that need to be cleaned up in your life. Live in such a way that when the end comes, you're ready. You live ready. And don't live in such a way that you have to wait for King Sennacherib to show up, so to speak, before you get down to business with God. Live like King Hezekiah in that you're on believing ground. You're doing the things that you need to be doing, and that when difficulties come, you can pray with confidence. You can believe with confidence because you know that you've been doing the things that God has called you to do. And there's great freedom in that. There's great freedom in knowing that you are doing exactly what God wants you to do. The phrase and the passage of scripture that had been going over in my mind this past week was Psalms 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain that build it. Later on in that same passage of scripture, it says it's vain for you to rise up early and to go to bed late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for he gives to his beloved even in his sleep. I think the King James says he gives to his beloved sleep, but another translation translates it, he gives even in his sleep. And, I was reminded of that with the story of King Hezekiah. Here is King Hezekiah wondering how in the world are we going to ever defeat this massive Assyrian host? And yet it was while Hezekiah was sleeping that God did the work. And one angel eliminated 185,000 warriors, and suddenly, they have victory without ever firing a shot, so to speak, without ever lifting a finger, without ever doing anything. And that's the way that God can work. There are times when we are reminded, yes, our work may be important and we need to be diligent, but at the end of the day, even when we've done all we can do, it's not enough. And yet God gives even in our sleep, that he is the one who is able to deliver even while we are sleeping, that his work is not dependent on us being awake, that he is working even when we are not. And that was a huge encouragement to me. I got some amazing news on the way home. And the news isn't public yet, and so I can't say specifically what it is. But it was a reminder to me of that very truth. That while I was doing this work that God had given me to do, and I was with my family and we were doing these things in Alaska, God was working on other fronts, doing other things that I couldn't have ever done. And it really had nothing to do with my abilities or with me successfully executing my strategic plan. And yet God did an amazing thing. And I'll tell you about it sometime. But it was amazing to see that. And I got that news as I was standing in the airport there in Phoenix, Arizona, getting ready to board a flight. I was tired, and yet recognition that God was working. He was working in our situation. He was working, and he was doing it even while we were sleeping. I don't know what you're facing right now. I don't know what kinds of challenges that you're up against, but I just want to encourage you, friends. God is a God who can be trusted. And unless he's building the house, we're laboring in vain. It doesn't negate our labor. You know, if you're going to build a house, there has to be someone building it. But unless the Lord is building along with us, we're building in vain. What we're doing is never going to be enough. But with God, all things are possible. And so I'm excited about the next steps. I'm excited to see what God is going to continue to do here at Victory Acres as we take next steps and as we continue to just move the ball down the field, so to speak. And I'm excited to see what God is doing in Alaska and how God is helping them there at Chena Camp. And I'm excited to see what God is doing where you're at as well. As many of you as friends have shared different times, and we've had an opportunity to be able to connect with different leaders, it's always exciting to me to see the ways in which God is at work. And so be encouraged, friends. Know that God is for us, and if God is for us, who can be against us? And just want to encourage you with that today. For Gleaning and Gathering, God bless.